my 16th.
Sorry.
That's okay. This is my 16th year in gifted ed. I work at Topeka Public Schools. I'm an elementary facilitator, and then I am a secondary consulting teacher for the secondary gifted teachers. Something that's going good so far is I have a classroom for the first time I've never had a classroom as a gifted teacher. So this is the first time that I am not the one traveling. The students travel to me, and it is an absolute joy.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm just going to go down my list as I see you guys, if that's okay with you. So how about Jennifer? Would you be willing to share next?
Can you guys hear me? Sorry you can't see me.
Yep, now we can. Go for it.
I'm Jennifer Matson. I work for the SEK Interlocal here in Pittsburgh, Kansas, but I do elementary gifted in Pittsburgh for USD 250, and I also do 2nd through 12th grade at Baxter Springs. This is my first year as a gifted facilitator. I've been in K1 for the past 13 years. So far this year, it's been great. I've loved getting to know the students, and it's really challenged me to be a better educator by learning something new. So I'm happy to be here and excited to have this boot camp today.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Deb, would you like to go?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Let's see. Things that are going well so far. I work for TASN, by the way. That's the Technical Assistant Systems Network for KSDE. For me, there were file review trainings last week, and they're over now, so that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned, because they're a lot of work. We're starting a new cycle for file review, and so we train cohort 1, whose files will be reviewed next spring. And something going great so far is one of the things I work with is secondary transition, and we're providing a 3-tiered approach to professional development and resources to local districts this year, and that's been going well so far. So thanks for asking me to share.
Yes, thank you. Next, I see Jessica.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces out there. I'm Jessica LaFollette, and I'm a past president of KGTC, but I work in the Piper School District, which is just outside of Kansas City. And something going great so far for me is that I have a new principal in my building, and it's my first new boss in like 16 years. I worked for the same principal for a really long time. I was a little nervous about the transition, but it's actually like been very fantastic. I have never had an administrator who read every IEP before the school year started, and now I have one. So that's wonderful. We have like some real accountability going on now in my building. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, that's exciting. Good deal. Okay, next. Oh, people have moved a little bit. I see Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela Coleman, and I work in USD 232, which is DeSoto District, and I'm at Riverview Elementary. And something going great so far is the kids are just awesome. Our gifted group is just, we're planning the Battle of the Brains right now for Burns and McDonald, and they're so excited. And they did it, a couple of them did it a few years back, and they're just ready to go. So they come in every day excited and wanting to learn and wanting to grow. So it's been great.
Yes, that's all. Battle of the Brains is so fun. Yeah, I had a group that I got at middle school who had placed like in the top 4 or something when they were in elementary school. So they were super fired up to do it again. So very good. Thank you. How about Michelle?
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Meyer. I work for the co-op at USD 305, and so I'm actually K-12 gifted facilitator for Solomon, Abilene, Hope, Harrington, and White City. So I'm traveling a lot and learning how to teach out of my rolling cart. But I finally got to meet with all of my students for the second time last week, which was really nice. And we're kind of getting into a groove now. And something that's going great is I've had a awesome support system. I've already had to do 2 IEPs, and my mentor teacher was able to come with me for my first one and helped kind of calm my nerves. And so that's been really nice to have all that support right there for me. So
Awesome. Great. Glad to hear you have that support. So that's hard to feel like you're alone in the building or in the whole district, right? Or several districts with no one there with the experience to help you. So that's good to hear. How about Andrew?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I'm Andrew Mosby. I'm gifted facilitator for USD 320 Special Services Co-op. And I serve buildings for USD 329 as well as the half of the USD 320 district. Something that's going great for me so far this year is that I have a dedicated space to work in every building that I'm at. So I'm not teaching out of a cart all the time or out of the trunk of my car, as it would be.
All right. Very good. Thank you. How about Chris?
Okay, found the unmute button. I'm Chris, and I teach in Wellington 353, and I'm the new gifted facilitator for the district. So I'm learning how to go to all the schools. My background is elementary teaching. So it's been good meeting the groups, but a lot of new things.
Yep, very good. Take it one day at a time. You'll get there, right? Okay, how about Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz Holloway, and I work for the Beloit School District Co-op. So I serve 5 different districts in Beloit and Mankato, Cawker City Downs, Lincoln, Sylvan. So I travel quite a ways every week. I have something going good. I think I have one more student yet to meet. Otherwise, I've finally gotten to meet all of my students. I am learning a lot because I've done regular IEP meetings already. I've had interim IEPs that I've had to do, and I'm going to start serving a brand new student. So I'm learning about all the types of meetings and all the testing that goes into finding gifted students. So lots to learn.
Yes, absolutely. It's nice that you're kind of getting a little taste of everything at once at the beginning. A little overwhelming probably, but still good. And finally, I see Tammy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Mooney, and I work for Leavenworth Schools outside of Kansas City. And I currently serve students at the high school and the middle school in the area. Eventually, there should be elementary students added to my caseload, but not currently. So that'll be fun to figure out how to juggle more schools in there. I haven't met all of my students yet. It's really difficult to get those seniors in to come see me, those who are every other weekers for like 15 minutes. But I'm working on it. But what is going great so far is I actually share a classroom for the first time. And my classroom mate is the deaf and hard of hearing coordinator for the district, which is really cool for one of my students who's taking ASL online. They actually have some time to collaborate, which I think is really special. And I just really appreciate all the support that the district has provided me so far. So I'm really super excited. Yeah, I just moved back from Korea teaching, so this is new. I've taught gifted before, not in Korea, but in another state. But Kansas seems to do it a little differently from what my previous experience has been. So I'm just excited to learn more about resources and kind of what it is to teach gifted in Kansas. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it is definitely a different ballgame. I came from another state as well. And so there was a lot to learn for me as well, even though I had a lot of experience with gifted. So guys, great. Thank you all for sharing. Sound like we have a lot of common experiences that we're going through at the beginning of the year. Before we get rolling, just a couple of important dates. Our parent committee chair had reached out to me and wanted me to share with you all so that you can share with your parents. They have a ton of really great parent coffees. They're all virtual parent webinars, and they have one coming up on the 14th. I believe that's this Thursday. So a parent coffee during the day, and in the evening there's a webinar. And the topic for that is advocating without alienating, which apparently is a popular webinar they've done before. And so feel free to share that with the parents. You can send them to kgtc.org to get registered for either or both of those. And then, of course, we have our KGTC State Convention coming up on October 9th. I highly recommend, if you can get your district to pay for you to attend or pay for even part of it. It's going to be a jam-packed day of learning just about gifted in Kansas. So if you can make that happen, that would be well worth your time. You can find information about that on our website as well. Okay, here's our agenda for the evening. Welcome and intro. I've got 1 minute left, and then I'm going to pass it over to Kim Curtis, who's going to talk to you about writing and interpreting IEPs. And then we'll go to Deb McVeigh, who's going to talk to you about our twice exceptional learners. We'll take a break, get some stretch, refill your water or whatever beverage you're enjoying this evening. And then we're going to move to Dr. David Wolf, who's going to talk to you about intervention for gifted. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up with some curriculum resources to help you get going. And I'm going to give you a bazillion links and information that you can kind of take with you on your way out to use as you see fit. And then we'll wrap it up. We've got a quick survey. And at the end of that survey, you'll be able to request a certificate of attendance if you need it for professional development hours. Okay. All right. So 3:15, I'm right on time, which is rare. Oh, so I'm going to stop sharing. And let me make Kim a presenter here. Oh, apparently she can already do it. Make you a co-host.
Okay, well, first I want to apologize. I am hosting my son's wedding at my home in 2 weeks, and it is crazy around here. I have work going on in my attic. I have 2 barking dogs. I have yard work going on. So I apologize in advance. Okay, today I know that last time, if you attended, that Jessica talked in general about, I think, the entire IEP. Today, I'm going to just be focusing on PLAPs and goals. And I like to, when I have an IEP meeting with parents, I tend to refer to this as kind of the meat of a gifted IEP, because most of our students don't have any other disabilities. I mean, it's not common. I have a couple of elementary kids that are speech, and then we have hit or miss kids that have other things. But for most kids, this is going to be it in their IEP. So I also want to acknowledge that some of this material comes from KSDE and TASN and Deb McVeigh. I highly recommend that you check out the TASN resources if you have not found those. They have several really good slide presentations regarding IEPs, and I have linked to them in my presentation. So first, the PLAP stands for Present Levels of Academic and Functional Performance. It summarizes the child's current performance and provides the foundation upon which all other decisions in the IEP will be made. And I think that probably I get the most questions about PLAPs and goals from everybody, not just new people. So don't feel like you're not the only one who doesn't know what they're supposed to be writing in their goals. the little graphic here was shared at the file review presentation that Deb referred to this week, and I just thought it was really good. I think one of the hardest things to grasp is how the PLAP, the goal, and the progress reports all work together. If you don't have good PLAPs, it's hard to write a goal. If you don't have good PLAPs and a good goal, it's hard to monitor progress because you haven't stated what the student's needs are and what you're going to monitor. So I'm going to just jump in. Okay. So one of the biggest suggestions I have for anybody is to have the students help you write the PLAPs. I see so many teachers that put the brunt of this work on themselves. And really writing the PLAPs should be you, it should be the student, it can be the parents involved, and it should be classroom teachers involved as well. Because you have to show information from the gen ed classroom as well. I'm going to share a sample IEP with you later, and it is an excellent IEP. But part of the reason it's so good is that the facilitator that wrote this IEP gets to see those kids for 84 minutes, 5 days a week. So she knows her kids really, really well. I know that many of you do not have that much time to spend with your students. And so you aren't going to know every single little thing about them to put in an IEP. So again, I highly, highly recommend that you utilize the student to help you write this IEP. I start this with my third graders. My third graders get a little worksheet that they fill out that tells me what their interests and their strengths are. And then I always have them try to at least identify one area of difficulty or weakness, which can be really comical for third graders. But even from that age, I feel like, you know, they need to start understanding what this IEP is, why they have an IEP, and be involved in writing that IEP. So some of the things to include, and I have divided this into some areas that you can see here. Your co-op or your WebKids or whoever you use as your IEP provider, writer, everybody kind of has different boxes that they have to plug their information into. And so I've kind of just made some general areas that fit the information from TASN. And you may have strengths and interests in 2 separate boxes. You may have strengths, interests, functional performance in separate boxes. So I've just tried to throw everything in here, and you might have to kind of divide it a little bit differently depending on your forms. But things to include. You always want to include both academic and personal strengths. When I talk to my students about filling out their goal worksheet, I tell them I want to know what you're good at home and at school. And I also just want to know what you're interested in. And a lot of times they don't understand even the difference between strengths and interests, because I'll tell them that, you know, I might be really interested in ballet, even though I'm not very good at it. That's an interest. And so sometimes with my littles, I do have to divide that out for them. Functional performance is probably the hardest thing and the thing that I get the most questions about. How do I include functional performance for gifted kids? So functional performance can be leadership abilities. It can be social emotional issues, behavior or attention issues, task commitment. TASN has an excellent slide in this presentation regarding functional performance. It is slide 65, and it refers specifically to gifted kids. All right, is everybody looking at my slide that says functional performance in gifted only IEP? Okay. All right, this is from the TASN presentation on file review that was just updated. And it has so much stuff about functional performance. And again, I think that this is where people really struggle, especially if you don't know the student very well, or if the student doesn't have very good self-awareness and is not able to communicate with you about maybe what their areas of need are that are not related to academics. But basically, functional performance is anything non-academic. do they have trouble speaking in front of others? Do they have, are they a fabulous speaker? Do they have trouble paying attention? Do they have trouble turning their work in? Any of those things are functional. So one way to collect functional performance data is your observations. Another way is to ask the student. I love interest inventories or some sort of surveys. I'm going to share an executive function survey with you here in a minute. I use a Google form to collect data from classroom teachers, and I have specific functional performance questions in that form for them to click yes or no and then add comments about so that they can share information about what they see in the classroom. You can also get it from parents. Parents might tell you that, it's a battle every single night to get them to sit down and do their homework. That's functional performance. Personality conflicts with same-aged peers, or difficulty getting along with same-aged peers. All of those things are functional performance. Okay, I alluded to an executive function checklist. I think for middle and high school, this is an excellent tool to help you collect that functional data. Let's see if I can get to it. There are all kinds of executive function checklists out there on the internet. This is just one that a teacher of mine uses. It divides it into some areas. So again, it gives you some really good talking points for your functional performance. And then somewhere in the IEP, you always should include comments from at least one general education teacher. And where you put that, I think, depends on the student. If they're really positive comments, that's a strength. But they're not always that positive. So there's another place in here where I refer to these as well. But try really hard. I know sometimes my high school teachers will tell me that it is nearly impossible to get high school teachers to provide information prior to the meeting. So if nothing else, whoever the teacher is who attends your IEP meeting, you can always add those comments to the IEP at the meeting from the classroom teacher if needed. But that should be part of your IEP. Okay, the other big important area is needs. Why does this child need special education? Okay, so here I just put some samples of comments that I've seen, things that you might include. Why are you writing them an IEP, basically? What do they need? Why do you see them? What do you do with them? What are they going to get from you that they can't get from a general education teacher or a general education classroom? So make sure that you talk about the things they need. Just provided you some samples here. I hope it's helpful. Okay, current performance. And again, this could be divided lots of ways in your IEP paperwork. Right now, ours is divided into academic performance, and then we have a separate box for assessment data. So however yours is divided, some of the things that could or should be included: current course grades, perhaps class rank if it's a high school student, ACT, PSAT results, MAP assessments or other achievement assessments that are given to all students could be included. Kansas State assessments can be included. Past performance in honors or AP classes could be listed here. Perhaps even data from projects they've done with you could be here, because then that's going to lead into baseline for you. I also suggest that any functional performance items or comments from classroom teachers that aren't really a strength, this is sometimes a good place to stick those in and address them that way. Okay. Most of you probably have someplace in your IEP where you have to talk about the impact of the exceptionality. So here I just have tried to give you a lot of examples of what that impact might look like. The first one, I believe I took that from an elementary one. The next one is obviously high school. I think the third one came from maybe a middle school student. So just some examples of things that you might say to help justify, again, you know, why do they need the special education, and how does the exceptionality impact them compared to their general education peers? Okay, goals. Again, I highly recommend the IEP bootcamp if you struggle to write goals. I seriously open it up probably once a week when I am reviewing middle school and high school IEPs to just refresh myself on the goals. And particularly, probably what gets me the most is the condition. You know, goals are not about participation, exploration, attendance, activities such as History Day or Battle of the Brains. It's not about what the teacher does. It's not about providing opportunities, and it's not about events. So those things are definitely things to be avoided. In the file review workshop last week, these were 3 goals that were shared by Tazen. One is probably a younger student, a general research goal that could be applied to a lot of students. The second one, also a 3rd grade student. And then the last one was an older student that was going to be taking geometry. So those were just some samples that KSDE gave. I also prepared a document for you with a few more, because I feel like I probably get the most questions on goals from secondary teachers. It seems like those are a little bit harder to write. So I tried to come up with some goals that were related to multiple grade, from grade levels 6 through 12. And I also tried to include the rubric if they mentioned a rubric. But again, there's lots of rubrics available online, lots of research rubrics. I did link to one here, but again, if you don't like it, there's so many out there, you shouldn't have trouble finding one. And then for my samples are pretty ELA heavy at the middle school level, because that is what our students take their gifted block is during their ELA block. But I know that there's that geometry sample from above if you need a math sample. And then I also listed some high school ones, and I did include the baseline. So remember, let me see where I'm going to go back to that. I will tell you, there's one rubric I did not include on here for you. I did not include this college readiness rubric that I referenced. Oh, no, I did. I'm sorry. I did. But I'm going to say I don't like it. I feel like it is too much. It's too long. But I think that if you are interested in writing this kind of a goal, that you could use this as a starting place. And you could modify it or look for something similar that would meet your needs. Because I'm not fond of this rubric. I am fond of the goals, but I'm not fond of the rubric. So I just wanted to add that. All right, let me go back. Okay, I also included the link to the Tazen IEP Bootcamp. Again, if you haven't looked at that, it is such a good resource. I would save that and have it handy all the time. I require that rubrics be attached. So if sometimes my staff will put the rubric in the baseline box, I prefer it as an attachment as a PDF. But if you are referring to a specific rubric, it really should be included in the IEP somewhere. If that student would move, the next teacher is going to just love you if that IEP is or if the rubric is attached to their IEP somewhere. All right, baseline. You must have a baseline for the goal to judge if the criteria is appropriate and if the student is making progress. The goal, the baseline, and the progress report must use the same method of measuring the student's performance. And this is probably one of the biggest problems that I see with gifted IEPs. It can be hard when, especially if you don't see your students that often, progress monitoring can be hard. But when they do file review, one of the things they look at is, do all of those things match up? Is your progress monitoring more than just saying Jill's doing great or Jackie's doing great? There has to be some data that relates to their goal. So just be sure that if you're referencing a specific rubric, that rubric is going to be tied to the baseline and to your progress monitoring when it comes time to progress monitor. And maybe they haven't made progress. Maybe the baseline could be the same as their first progress report, their score might be the same as what the baseline was if they haven't made progress, but you should have some numbers in there and reference that measurement tool. Or another thing that I've tried to get some of my staff to do is maybe they haven't finished all of the research project, but maybe they've gotten part of it done. And you can use that measurement tool and just use part of that rubric and measure that part that they've completed. And that would give you data that matches with their goal and their baseline. And then another piece that should be addressed somewhere is concerns of the parent. And this came straight from the file review document again, that parents need the opportunity to express their concerns for enhancing the education of their child. And again, if you can't get parent input prior to the meeting, this might be something you have to add at the actual IEP meeting. But make sure that somewhere you've included comments from the parents about their child's progress in special education, even if it's only positive and it's a pat on the back for you. Include something. Okay. All right, I have a few more things to share, but I wanted to give you guys a chance to ask me questions about what I've said so far. Wait, I have a question for Michelle. Who's your mentor? And why do you have Abilene and not Christy?
I actually only have Abilene K5.
Okay.
He is my mentor. Yes.
Okay.
So
All right.
we split Abilene, and then I have K12 for everybody else.
Okay. All right. That was my question, because I thought Christy was still there. I love Christy. She's awesome. You're lucky to have her as a mentor.
Been fantastic. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other things I've said that you're like, oh my gosh, I've never ever heard that, or I don't know if that's right, or you're welcome to Jessica. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Tammy had a really great question in the chat, and I answered her, and so did Carrie. But I want to make sure that we clear it all up and let you answer that question too. How often do we have to report progress? Was the question.
Thank you. Yes,
So,
progress.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Progress monitoring has to be done as often as the general education teacher does progress monitoring. So generally, it's at least 4 times a year. And whenever the grade cards go out, that is when a progress report should go out. You also really need to do a final progress report before you start writing the new IEP. And this is something that I'm trying with my staff this year. They are not used to doing that, but we are trying to get better about that, that before you start that new IEP, the first thing you do, before you even do a notice of meeting for that upcoming meeting, is you do a progress report to end the previous IEP cycle. But when they go to do file review, they should always see in a complete IEP year at least 4 progress reports. So generally it's when teachers report progress.
Okay, so can I just ask a clarifying question? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know if this is just our district, but I was told that I needed to progress monitor, collect data weekly, like every week. And I'm running into an issue because I have over 40 students, and a lot of them I don't even see every week. So I guess I just want to make it clear, because I feel like they're uncomfortable giving me an answer, yes or no, if I have to collect this data weekly, but I don't want to be out of compliance, but then I don't know how this is going to be possible. So I just want to get clarification, so
Okay.
I am.
Deb, would you mind answering that, Deb?
I just unmuted so I could talk about this.
Thank you.
Yeah, progress monitoring was one of the biggest errors in our file review over the last couple of years. In the IEP, you somewhere must report how often you will do progress monitoring and report it to parents. And then also you need to talk about how you will collect data. And the way you collect data must match the measurement method that's reported or described in the goal. So you need to make sure that your progress reports match what you say in the IEP. There's no set requirement. There was an old requirement, you have to do it as often as you do it for gen ed students, but that requirement doesn't actually exist anymore. But I think it's a good one, and I would at least continue to do that. I think it would be best practice. You need to make sure, though, that you keep copies of the progress reports that you send to parents, and that what you send to parents describes the child's progress in terms of their progress toward the goal using the same measurement method. And so what goes in the IEP is how often are you going to do progress monitoring and report to parents, what your measurement method is going to be, that has to match the goal. And then you have to collect and submit your actual progress reports, and they have to match what you said you were going to do. So there's sort of like 3 parts to this, and I'm hoping it's clear exactly what you have to collect and what you have to submit.
And it sounds to me, Tammy, like that is definitely just a district requirement.
Yes.
And if you don't see a student every week, I don't see how you're going to report progress on it. So I think I would definitely have some discussions with administrators about that.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to keep going because I only have about 6 minutes. So I'm going to share my screen again and just show you a couple more things. Okay, these IEP tip sheets are awesome. There are, I think there's about 9 of them from the Progress Center. And their, let me scroll down. Yeah, their website address is right here, promotingprogress.org. But these are excellent.
I'm sorry, we don't see your screen.
Okay, hold on. Let me go back. Okay, better? Okay, all right, so the website is called promotingprogress.org, and they've got this series of IEP tip sheets, and they have quite a few different ones. The ones I've included today is their PLAPS one. I've also included their measurable annual goal page, and then their measuring progress towards annual goal page. Because they just have some really good, very easy to understand information. And then the other thing that I want to encourage you to look at is Chapter 4 of the KSDE Special Education Process Handbook. Chapter 4 has a lot of important stuff in it. Another question I often get is about benchmarks for gifted kids. And if your district has questions about benchmarks, this document right here has very specific information about when benchmarks must be included on an IEP. And they would never be required by the state on a gifted IEP because a gifted student is probably not going to take an alternate assessment. The state only requires benchmarks for students who take alternate assessments. So that information can be found here in Chapter 4 of the Process Handbook. Okay, the other thing I have shared with you is a sample IEP. I know as an early teacher, this is one of the things that I really wanted to get my hands on. So I have pulled a middle school IEP. And again, this is the teacher I said who sees her students for 84 minutes, 5 days a week. So it is an excellent IEP. And he's an 8th grader. So she's had him for 6th grade, 7th grade, and now 8th grade. So she knows this student really well. And again, your IEP is probably not going to be set up exactly like this one. We actually do not use WebKids anymore. This is our first year using Synergy. And it's a pretty steep learning curve that we are still working out. But somewhere on your IEP, all these items should be included. So you can see that she has both her parent input and her student input right at the top. She has her strengths and interests. She has a very excellent area here on learning and behavior characteristics, which all of this would be considered functional. Well, not quite all of it. She's also got some writing and research I see there. But then you can see she's got the executive skills questionnaire. She's got social emotional. She's got information about his general education performance there under classroom observation. And then she's got her general education teacher comments. And this particular teacher, I think she must actually go and physically hunt these teachers down, because she always seems to have all of her teachers contributing information. She must really hound them. But she gets it all collected. And then she does again say, you know, where does this student struggle? I think that, you know, even though they're gifted, they all have areas they could work on. And then we have our needs area. Here is the summary of current assessments. And again, this teacher does an excellent job of hunting down data as well. And then finally, the impact of the exceptionality. And one of the things I really liked about this one, here you can see she has stated when she is going to report progress. And then her goal. And her goal, she wrote a speaking goal for this student. And I really liked it because up here in the PLAPs, if you read them real closely, she talks about that this is an area where this student struggles, that he does not like to speak in front of others. He does not do well when he's required to give speeches. And so this was a really easy place for her to put a goal. And you can see that on the baseline, hold on, yes. His baseline, he scored an average of 2, and that his goal is going to be to score an average of 3.3. And you'll see a little bit farther down here that she has also attached the rubric that she is referring to. Here's her statement of services. He's an 8th grader, so you can see that for the remainder of this year, he gets his 84 minutes. Then next, he also goes to the high school to take math, and so he has some transportation service for that. And then next year at the high school, he will go to the high school service model. Here is her rubric. She had that attached as an attachment. And then she also had an area where she documented attempts to contact the parents to do scheduling. Okay, so that is everything that I put in the Padlet for you. I also put my email address in the chat so that if you have questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me later and ask questions. I will say Deb McVeigh is the guru of gifted IEPs, so she's also an excellent resource. Jessica LaFollette is an excellent resource. Questions? Anything else you guys want to know? Jessica, anything to add? I know I went really fast.
That was awesome. Can you come train people in my district that quickly? That was great.
It's tough. I know it's tough. We have some high school teachers that have, 60 kids on their caseload, and it is tough to write an IEP that looks like the one I just showed you for 60 kids. That particular teacher only has about 20 on her caseload. So it's a lot easier to write an IEP like that when you only have 20 kids. So, don't beat yourself over the head if you're looking at your own IEPs and going, wow, I really need to step it up. I encourage you, use the students, have them help you do that work. It should not all be on your shoulders. This IEP is for them. They should know what's in it. They can help contribute to what's in it. They can help pick their goals. Like I said, even my very little, my 3rd graders, I pick their goal, but they help me write their strengths and their interests. And then starting in 5th or 4th grade, I have my students pick their goal. I give them a goal bank and give them some options, and we talk about what they need to work on. And then they help me pick a goal for them. And so I don't think you should feel like that writing that IEP is entirely on your shoulders. I do think that you need to spread the joy and let others help you get that work done.
And have the student come to the meeting. I mean, unless there's something really serious that you're going to be discussing that you need, you know, a team approach on before the kid is in the room, which that's happens sometimes, but as a general practice, have them there. And then by the time they get to middle school and high school, they're comfortable almost leading the meeting themselves. And that really brings a lot more power to the goal that you develop with the student, and that self-advocacy of, you know, talking about their own needs and interests, and kind of the point. And most of them can handle that. So yeah, bring them on in.
And that may be what they need to work on. That could even be their goal, could be self-advocacy. So, you know, when you're thinking about that goal, just think about what do they need? And if you can justify that need in the PLAPs, and you can come up with a way to measure progress towards that, that can be a goal. You know, find you a self-advocacy rubric, reassess on it, and you've got a goal idea there if that's what that kid needs to work on.
Yeah, there's something really powerful about having the kids in the meeting and them hearing the feedback from their teachers about their strengths and how they're performing in class. And sometimes the kids don't really get to hear that from their teachers. So it's fun to watch them kind of light up when they hear all the great things their teachers said about them. And hopefully they're all great things.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Any more questions for Kim?
Okay. Well, thank you. I hope you all have a wonderful year, and I hope we see you at conference in October.
Yes, absolutely. And I went ahead and stuck the Padlet in the chat again in case you didn't grab that earlier in the session. But that's got all the resources that Kim just went through with you, which means we are now ready for Ms. McVeigh. Are you ready?
I am ready. Are you going to share screen with me? So
let's see.
Or maybe I already have it. Oh, yes, I already have it. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, I'll go ahead and make you a co-host. All right, whenever you're ready.
All right. And all right, so on your screen, do you see twice exceptional students and key elements of the IEP?
Yes, we do.
You do. Okay, that's great. My name is Deb McVeigh, and I work for TASN, which is the technical assistance arm of the State Department of Education. The network is made up of a lot of different projects. One is the Autism Project, one is the Mentoring Project, and there's one is MTSS, there's a whole bunch of them. But one of those projects is called the Technical Assistance Team, or TAT for short, and it's made up of people who have retired once or twice, like me, and who've mostly, except for me, they're all ex-directors of special education who've retired. And my background was as a school psych, but we provide assistance to districts with regard to a wide variety of needs. This PowerPoint is posted on the Padlet. There's an earlier version of this training focused on the key elements of the IEP, which is on the TASN website. You'll see the web address for the TASN website in the lower right-hand corner there. So I'm going to talk today about the characteristics of twice exceptional students, and then go over sort of a review for some people if you saw our presentation in the spring, but what are some of the key elements of the IEP for twice exceptional students? So in Kansas, twice exceptional students are students identified both as a student with a disability, and it could be any kind of disability, and also as a gifted student. Things are different for gifted in Kansas because in Kansas, giftedness services are part of special education. And I've heard there's only 3 states in the country that include gifted as part of special education. So we talk a lot about students with an exceptionality, meaning either giftedness or a disability. I know in some states and in some professional literature, you'll hear twice exceptional referred to as students who are both gifted and learning disabled. And in other places and in other professional literature, twice exceptional is used for students who are gifted but who also have neurological issues or who fall somewhere on the autism spectrum. So it is a little bit different in Kansas because students with giftedness are served through special education. That means you have to write IEPs for those students, which is a heavy load, I know, for gifted teachers, but it does result, I think, in parents know that they have more assurance of actually obtaining services for their gifted child in places where it's guaranteed in regulation as part of special education. So the Davidson Institute listed some of the traits or characteristics that they have found in the research as characteristics of students who have 2 exceptionalities, giftedness and some sort of disability. And I find that twice exceptional students are pretty rare, but it's so important to be sensitive to their needs and to think about both their needs and their strengths and to use their strengths to address their learning issues. So I'm just going to let you read this for yourself. We know that many of the students who are twice exceptional, even though they're gifted, often have difficulties with cognitive processing, especially in the areas of reading and writing. And also, they often have behavioral issues as well. So as you think about how we identify twice exceptional students, it's really important that our assessment approach use a multi-dimensional approach, that we use multiple assessments and multiple ways of collecting information. One of the issues in identifying students as twice exceptional is that a student's disability tends to cover up, if you will, their giftedness. And their giftedness often is used to compensate for what in actuality is a type of disability. And so sometimes we miss seeing the fact that this student really has exceptionalities that need to be addressed. It's important to use both formal and informal assessments. And because most twice exceptional children are very inconsistent in their performance, have uneven skills, development asynchronously, it's important to look at subtest scatter, especially on cognitive assessments, but also on tests of achievement. In order to make sure that we're not missing identifying twice exceptional students, it's really always important to collect good information about a student's strengths and weaknesses to help identify those students who might potentially be twice exceptional. When it comes to the actual eligibility decision-making process, it's really important to review and think about the meaning of the indicators for both giftedness and the various disability categories you might be considering in the eligibility indicators document. As a new teacher, you may not have encountered that yet, but you can find it on the KSDE website at ksde.org. And it's also on the TASN website. It might be easier to find on the TASN website. On the TASN website, you can click on resources, and that brings up a search engine, and you can put in the words eligibility indicators and search, and that document should come up. Okay. Oops, I skipped one. I want to talk a little bit now about what are some research-based practices that I found in the literature regarding instruction of twice exceptional students. And of course, the first thing is to use evidence-based practices in working with students, both evidence-based practices for their area of disability and for their giftedness. But it's always important to use strength-based strategies to try to improve areas of weakness or help with skill growth. It's really important, especially with 2E students, to address that individual's social emotional needs. Because 2E students are really likely to have challenges in the social emotional area. I always say that twice exceptional students are the most fun students to work with because they are exceptionally creative and always think outside the box. But again, they can be challenging and have needs to be addressed in the emotional area. Again, as you're thinking about instruction, you need to plan for and use accommodations and instructional modifications to both the curriculum and the environment. 2E students react well to using technology, and so we need to think about that. If you have a student with a disability, you might also want to think about whether there are assistive technology programs or software or even hardware that might be helpful for that student. And the research says that often 2E students react well to accessing supports within the areas of art and music. Some more research-based practices are things really addressing some teacher needs. Teachers need to understand twice exceptional students and their needs and how their needs and strengths may interact with each other. One of the services that can be listed in the IEP, but seldom is, are services for school personnel. And so it behooves the IEP team writing the IEP to think about whether consultation or education for the general classroom teacher is warranted in the IEP because of the needs of a twice exceptional student. And again, this is true for every student, but especially for 2E students. Special education teachers, gifted consultants, and parents need to communicate and collaborate with each other. One of the issues regarding least restrictive environment for 2E students is the fact that we need to allow for fluidity in their least restrictive environment placement, as a student's needs might change over time and may change with some frequency, needing to allow for adjustment in placements on a more frequent basis than we would expect for gifted only or disabled only students. So it's important to think about least restrictive environment as part of the IEP meeting. And then within general education and special education, we want to provide an inclusive environment that celebrates diversity, because that diversity is something you are definitely going to see within that twice exceptional student. All right, so as you're writing an IEP for a twice exceptional student, these are some just general things you need to remember. The IEP must meet all the requirements for both gifted students and students with disability. There are a couple things that are different for gifted students, including consideration of acceleration and for students with disabilities. And we'll talk a little bit more about those on later slides. And the IEP team needs to develop a transition plan for 2E students who are 14 and older, because all of the requirements for students with disabilities apply to that 2E student. And that includes the requirement for transition planning. That doesn't exist for gifted only students, but it will have to be done for 2E students. Now, the sort of flip side of that is that 2E students are eligible for all types of special education services. That's not true for gifted only students, but it is true for all students who are eligible for an IEP as a student with a disability, and therefore for 2E students. Okay, this is just a summary of the 3 types of information that need to be found in the PLAFs. One is present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, a statement that describes how the child's exceptionality impacts their involvement or progress in the gen ed curriculum, and third, a description of baseline data for high priority needs that will become goals. So let's think about keys within academic achievement for twice exceptional students. And the key is to consider both strengths and needs. I've written some sources or possible sources of data that might be available in your district that could describe both strengths and needs. So that might be assessments or screening data, or what you've measured from SIT interventions about a student's learning rate, or rubrics, and of course, parent concerns as well. And the same thing is true for functional performance. It's really critical for twice exceptional students that you consider both strengths and needs and have a good understanding of what those are within the area of functional performance. So you need to think about motor skills, social emotional issues, task completion, perception or attention issues, executive function, memory issues, career interests, communication skills, behavioral issues, and parent concerns. When you begin to think about the impact of exceptionality, this is going to be a complicated issue to describe for twice exceptional students. So I've written down at least one question, 2 considerations. So the first question is, how does the student's dual exceptionality impact their ability to be involved in or have access to and make progress in the general curriculum? Both aspects of that dual exceptionality will impact their access to and progress in the general curriculum, and that needs to be described in the PLAFs of the IEP. Also, the IEP team should think about how the student's disability and their giftedness interact with each other to impact their academic and functional progress. And then think about how the interaction of the 2 exceptionalities impacts the student's social and emotional functioning. We tend to see higher levels of frustration in students that are experiencing both giftedness and a disability, as you might expect, because that has to be difficult to understand yourself and to deal with the outcomes of being both gifted and disabled at the same time. Now, again, for kids who are 14 or older, the PLAFs for 2E students must include transition assessment. And the requirements for that are that somewhere in the PLAFs, you need to describe the student's needs, strengths, preferences, and interests related to life after high school? What are those long-term expectations or interests or abilities for the student that relate to what they want to do after they leave high school? So you would want to include any career awareness exploration activities that you might have conducted, like an interest inventory. When you give any sort of transition assessment, you need to make sure that the child's disability doesn't interfere with expressing their interests or preference. There are some reading-free career interest inventories that are available if you have a student with reading impairment, and you need to take that into account when collecting information about their career interests. And then hopefully we want you to include in the PLAFs about transition assessment any general education assessment results that were given to all students to help write the individual plan of study for a student. And those are usually things like career cruising or Zello, or your district may use something else. But find out what that general ed assessment is so that you can access those results. Based upon that transition assessment, you need to write for your transition plan measurable post-secondary goals. So if the student's going to be 14 or older during the time period of the IEP, you must have measurable post-secondary goals that address the areas of first, training, post-secondary training or education, and another goal regarding employment after high school. And then if the student has issues with independent living skills, then you need to include that as well. It seems highly unlikely that a twice exceptional student would have issues with independent living skills, but I suppose it might be a possibility and should be considered. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about annual goals, which are different from post-secondary goals. And one of the questions we ask in file review is we want you to make sure that all of the annual goals in the IEP are designed to meet the student's needs that result from the student's disability or giftedness. But in this case of a twice exceptional student, this should really read the student's need that result from the student's disability and giftedness. And so the annual goals may address, in some instances, learning strengths, and in other instances, areas of need or weakness. But the point of the goals is to enable the student to be involved in and make progress in the general education, or because of the giftedness, perhaps an advanced curriculum. So in order to have a measurable annual goal, that goal has to have 4 components: a behavior or skill, a condition, that's how you're going to measure it, the criteria, where you want the student to be a year from now, and a time frame, which is almost always a year, but could be shorter. So again, the key for goals is that they need to address both strengths and needs. So first of all, think, is there a need for a goal that describes growth in areas of academically advanced skills? Second, is there a need for a goal that describes growth in areas of academic challenge? Is there a need for a goal that describes growth in areas of social and emotional need? And are there any other high priority needs that are an issue for the student that might need a goal? Generally, we want you to write fewer goals, but really address those high priority needs. Oftentimes, students who are twice exceptional, because they have both learning strengths and learning challenges, sometimes end up with a lot of goals. And we'd really like you to stay focused on what are the goals we really need the most. Okay, so we've talked about PLAFs and we've talked about goals. The third big part of the IEP are services, special education services. So because we're now adding disability to the mix of giftedness, I want to remind you that provision of a services or any service does not depend on the type of disability a student has. Once a child's been identified as eligible for special education as a student with a disability, that student's eligible for any type of service deemed by the IEP team to be needed. Gifted-only students are not eligible for certain kinds of services, but 2E students are, because a part of their label is that they are a student with a disability. So there are 5 types of special education services. Special ed services, those are the instructional services you provide. Related services are things like transportation, speech and language, OT and PT, perhaps. Supplementary aids and service include accommodations, and they also, for students with a disability, mean you need to think about things like assistive technology or special ed supports that are non-academic. And one example of that would be if a deaf student might need a sign language interpreter during football practice. That would be a non-academic special education service. Program modifications are significant changes to the curriculum being provided to the student, whether it's an advancement or working with the student at a lower level. And supports for school personnel are the only place in the IEP you get to talk about what you're going to do for a teacher. The thing to remember about twice exceptional students is they're likely to need a very unique combination of services. It won't be typical of that for gifted students. It won't be typical of that for a student with a disability. It's going to be unique. So we first think sometimes from a traditional viewpoint, what will the gifted part look like? And then what will the special ed part look like? And we sort of in silos, each do our own things. But it's really important that the IEP team think about, can we do something different to meet those unique needs? Can we create new combinations of services? Or can we provide services in unique settings? So please don't just do the gifted silo, special ed silo, IEP services, but think about unique combinations that do a better job of meeting the needs of the student. And then as part of the IEP, you also need to think about what does special ed need to do and provide within the general ed setting. Are accommodations needed? Are program modifications needed? And if so, those need to be included in the IEP. And of course, because this is a student with a disability, we also need to think about, for students who are 14 and older, what transition services might be needed. One of the things that you will do is you will need to write a course of study for that student 14 or older that will describe both the general ed classes and the electives and types of electives that will assist the student in reaching his post-secondary goals. This will be very different for gifted teachers, and you will need to coordinate with teachers of students with disabilities to know more about exactly how to write that courses of study. Transition services are a coordinated set of activities based on the student needs, taking into account the student's strengths, preferences, and interests, and are services provided by the school as part of the school's offer of FAPE, a free appropriate public education. Because we try and want to include students and parents in transition planning, sometimes the services include things the parent or student will do. And it's good to think about that, but please provide descriptions of those things within the present level statement. The services, again, are the district's offer of FAPE and should only include services provided either by the school or by a coordinating agency. So these are the areas you need to address for transition services. Those might include instruction, like helping a student learn to be a better self-advocate. That would be a kind of instruction. Or related services, community experiences, employment or work experiences, work on adult living objectives like learning how to keep a checkbook is one of those. Daily living skills if needed, or if appropriate, looking at a functional vocational evaluation. And again, coordinating with special ed staff who deal with writing transition plans would be really important in thinking about developing and identifying transition services for a twice exceptional student. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about placement in the least restrictive environment, because the IEP needs to describe the extent, if any, to which the child will not participate with students without exceptionalities in the general education class and in extracurricular and non-academic activities. That would be like for elementary recess or lunch or after school clubs. Those would all be extracurricular and non-academic activities. Now, again, gifted teachers may not have encountered this before, but children with disabilities are to be removed from the general education environment only if the nature or severity of the child's disability is such that education in general ed classes without the use of supplementary aids and services or modifications cannot be satisfactorily achieved. So again, those supplementary aids and services would be things like accommodations or assistive technology or some other supports that you might provide. But if your child is a child with a disability, and this would include twice exceptional students, you need to think very carefully about the times you might pull them out of class, out of the general ed setting. So to summarize, the IEP for a twice exceptional student will be quite unique in both development and implementation. I always say that the IEP team should use the IEP to help other people who might be reading the IEP understand the uniqueness of that individual, unique strengths and unique needs. For 2E students, coordination between teachers and students with disabilities and teachers and students with giftedness is really critical for twice exceptional students. And collaboration between general educators and special educators is really crucial for success for students with dual exceptionalities. Again, you must meet requirements, and I've talked a lot about requirements, but the best IEPs come from your knowledge of and caring for each individual student. That's true for all the students you work with. Okay, I can't see the chat right now, so Are there questions in the chat? Otherwise, if you think of a question tomorrow, please feel free to email me at either of my email addresses. I know that some districts email don't like .com email addresses. So if that's true for your district, go ahead and use the keystonelearning.org email address, DMcVeigh. All right, any questions?
I don't see any in the chat, but our participants are welcome to unmute and ask Deb any questions that come up as she's shared. Okay. All right, good. We're assuming we're going well, and you guys are, your brains are filling up. And it looks like we're a little ahead of schedule. So
Yes.
let's go ahead and take our break. Use this time too, if you want to drop any questions in the chat, feel free. Let's come back at, let's see, about 4:40. Does that sound right? Give us 17 minutes. So 4:40, we'll see you back here. Go stretch, get up and move. Put it in the chat, 4:40. All right, it is 4:40. Did everybody make it back? I don't see any other faces. There's one. There's two. Okay. Good. Thank you for coming back. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let me just double check. Thank you, Chris. Hello. Okay. All right. I'm seeing some faces now. Okay, since we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, which is good because I didn't have nearly enough time for the end section, I'm going to go ahead and start since David is not here yet. And I've kind of got two different sections that I'm going to be sharing. And the first one is all about differentiation, which will really tie in nicely, I think, to David's RTI MTSS interventions, because a lot of these resources will be good tools for collecting information for students who show the potential for being identified gifted. So you will find these in your Padlet. I went ahead and put the link in there one more time. So let me switch over to that screen. Okay. In here in that far right column, curriculum resources, click on the second one called Differentiating Up Playlist. And hopefully this is going to work for you. Okay, so this was something I compiled for another session along with some other KGTC peers and other educators. Most of this is stuff I have curated. Some of it I've created, but a lot of it I've curated. So just know that these are in a variety of different places. Now, there's a ton of information in here. So what I thought we would do, instead of me walking through every single one of these, how about I give you about, let's go with about 10 minutes to explore, have a little scavenger hunt, and find one resource that you feel like you could share with a general education teacher or use in your gifted classroom. Okay. Did that open okay for you? Are you able to click on the links that are in there? Yes, thank you. Okay. So choose a topic, click on it, explore. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. And I would love for everybody to have one resource to share that they found and can tell us a little something about it in the chat or out loud, either way. Okay, 10 minutes and I'll be quiet and let you explore. Hey, David, we're about got 6.5 more minutes left of a scavenger hunt that we're doing on a link in the Padlet. We'll put the Padlet back in there and then we'll be ready for you.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, just your 2-minute warning. If you're wanting to share something and type it in the chat, you can go ahead and start typing away and we'll share out in 2 minutes. Okay, that's time. All right. Well, hopefully you found some good stuff in there. I'd love to hear some people unmute and share out about something they found, either that they could use themselves or something that they would share with a general education teacher. Anyone? Okay, Michelle shared 3E model, enrich, extend, enhance. Yes. Template used to extend learning. Yeah, and that was we actually had a session last summer with Dr. Richard Cash, and that was one of the things that he really expanded on. And I think that's an excellent resource as well. So that's a good choice. Good. Anyone else? Or anything you had questions about?
Carrie, I'll say, since I'm a new gifted teacher, all those resources are great. And I'll be happy to share a lot of those with some of my teachers. So thank you for that resource. It's great. It's a wealth of information.
Good. I'm glad. I like a good playlist where you like find
Yes,
links to
that's
a
what
lot
it
of
is for
familiar
me.
things. Yes, yeah. And it's
Thank
something,
you for that.
save it and come back to it whenever you need it.
Yeah, so thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Chris asked what GPS stands for. Did anybody take a look at that?
Yeah, I looked at that one, and I think it might be something like general pre-assessment. It doesn't actually say anywhere on the form what GPS stands for.
Yeah,
I wondered that too, Chris.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked. So it's kind of like a the GPS used for navigation, right? To figure out where you are, what your starting point and where you're going is. So it is a pre-assessment to tell you where the kids need to go next. Yep. Good question. Global positioning, what is it? Global positioning system or something, what it really stands for. Go ahead, Jessica.
No, I was just going to say that I really love Ian Bird's differentiator, which is like one of the links all the way down at the bottom. If you didn't scroll all the way down there, it's under digging deeper with depth and complexity. And it's the little gold one that says prompt creator. And if you have any gen ed teachers, or even yourself, if you're used to just creating your objective, you take the objective that you already have or the one that comes directly from the standard, and you can like plug and play, and it will differentiate based on each of those things. It's really nice and sort of fun to do because it gives you ideas. Even if you're not exactly sure how you want to differentiate, just using those little tabs and clicking through his prompts will give you lots of ideas for how to differentiate something you haven't really differentiated before.
Yeah, that's a favorite of mine. Absolutely love it. I think I used it every year I was teaching with a variety of things. Yeah, really gets kids to think deeper because it gives you some options for that. And if you're trying to think of creative ideas for products, like there was one time we were doing research projects, and I basically outlawed the PowerPoint presentation. It was like death by PowerPoint, you know? So it gives you some ideas for other type of products that you could create. So, and Tammy says she liked the curriculum compactor. Yeah, very good. Help teachers look for ways to support those students that may be more advanced on their content and need at a faster pace. Great resource to share. Yep. Manzuli's template does make it simple. Yep. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, good. It looks like you found some little treats and goodies in there to use and share. Let me see if there is anything else. Learning contracts was one that I really used when I was a district coordinator and I had teachers not sure what to do with students. Everybody was cluster group there. There was no pullout. So there were these highly advanced students that weren't learning anything when they came to school, right? They had such a high level of proficiency already. And so I would create a learning contract with the students where I could take, these are the standards that they needed to learn. And I found out what their topics of interest were and use that to create a custom learning contract where they could self-pace and then still meet the objectives of the standards. That's a good one for when you have those, especially highly advanced students. Okay. All right, very good. Okay, I think I will stop sharing now. I think that's a good stopping point for me. And I'm going to now pass things over to Dr. David Wolf, who is going to talk to you about intervention for gifted.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad I actually got to see a little bit of what you were doing here ahead of time, because it sparked some thoughts in my head that I didn't plan on. So I'm just quickly going through my files. I'm like, oh, I could quickly pull out that or share this or that to maybe add to what I had already started to think about to talk with you about today. But it's good to see you all here today. Just a quick one sentence about myself. I teach at Pitt State in our undergrad education, elementary education, and elementary education unified program. So many of our unified students go out and work in special education, which includes gifted and talented. So I get excited when I can talk with my undergrads about the opportunity to go into gifted and talented and be facilitators like yourselves. So I'll keep recruiting as I can. In my former life, before going into higher ed, I was a principal as well as a district coordinator for gifted and talented services within our district in Minnesota, as well as my own interventionist. So I wore a coordinator hat as well as the intervention hat, and did many of tier 2 and tier 3 interventions when we were working with more levels of service at that time. So when Carrie asked me to share a little bit about MTSS and RTI, I'm coming at it from the perspective of, I don't want to make any assumptions that you all know exactly what it is. So I'm just going to give you a little overview of what RTI or MTSS can look like in a more inclusive model for gifted students. And then just share a little bit about possible data points you could be using or sharing with your teachers that they can be using in that tier 2 within their own classroom to give that more attention, more intense, more time for our gifted learners. So I will share my screen here and just start us off. All right. Perfect. All right. So just as a really quick synopsis here, RTI. So we hear these terms quite often, and we just need to refresh our memory sometimes of what they are and what they mean. Quite often we hear of MTSS, our multiple tier systems of support, as a very overarching and broad term for a lot of different support systems within our schools. Quite often RTI falls under MTSS as a very specific way of looking at and trying to intervene and work with our students that show that they have needs on challenge as well as support in different academic as well as behaviors. So when we start looking at these responses to our instruction or responses to intervention, we have to be very strategic in what we do to move on and keep thinking about what we can do to support our students. So an inclusive model for RTI looks more like a diamond. Okay, it's taking that pyramid look and turning it outside, making a reflection of it, and looking at it from a more of a continuum, so that we can see that all students are gaining that core instruction, that tier 1 instruction. Really, that's my next slide. It's really that core instruction. All children should be exposed to that. But in addition to that instruction that's going on in our core, some students need additional extensions, enrichments, enhancements, and challenge. And some of our students need an additional intervention for their to support them with more supports for them to be successful. And then we have our tier 3, which is that more intensive. So there's both sides to this diamond, and I think that's the best part of the RTI diamond, is that it really shows that all children belong on this continuum. It's not just the students that need additional supports with interventions. It also shows more of an inclusive model when it comes to many of our twice exceptional students, that we can need additional challenge and extension in one area, but we might need additional intervention in a different content area. So not every child is going to be in the same place in all content areas. And that's another kind of talking point I would talk with many of my teachers and administrators when we look at the RTI diamond, is that we can be in 2 different places at the exact same time. Same thing with the RTI diamond or the pyramid. The diamond, as you go further out into tier 2 and tier 3, that requires an increase of time and increase of intensity. So that time is going to be in the teacher and the preparation, of course, but also it includes more time for the student to be working in smaller or individualized groups with the teacher to meet their needs. Intensity, of course, then increases as well, as you need to continue to dig deeper into the depth and complexity of the instruction to continue that challenge or that intervention for that student to meet their individual needs. So I want to just give a quick little background on that, just to make sure that we're all on the same page when we talk about RTI and MTSS. Now, for a lot of schools, the classroom teacher is responsible for that tier 1 instruction, and quite often that tier 2 instruction, and that can look all sorts of different ways. And many of your roles really start to play in on that tier 3. Different districts are going to approach it differently. I lived in Minnesota and taught Minnesota for a good portion of my career, and the whole state is an MTSS state. So if because we don't have identification for gifted and talented, everything was MTSS. So we were constantly living in this world of looking at data and responding to the data and figuring out what was the best supports for our students. So of course, our tier 2 can be some of you, but in this sense, I'm going to be thinking about tier 2 as what can the classroom teacher do in addition to the core itself. So when I'm thinking about your roles and what you can do to partner with your classroom teachers, for your classroom teachers that are saying, I don't know even what type of data I should be looking at to figure out how to make small groups. What should I be looking at? And I would say for the most part, we have some of our common assessments that we have in our classrooms that they're using already. So many times the classroom teachers give assessments and then we just grade it and send it on, but we don't act upon those assessments. And there's a missing opportunity for our teachers, because that data point can be a perfect data point to reteach or extend and enrich. And so looking at our formative assessments, whether it's in the middle of our instructional sequence or our pre-assessment at the beginning of the instructional sequence, those 2 points are probably 2 of the most powerful opportunities for our classroom teachers to begin to differentiate. So if your classroom teachers are wondering where to start, that's what I would tell them. Pre-assess. Don't do that just to check it off and say, well, the curriculum told me to, and then just pass it on. Look at that data. There's powerful information in those pre-assessments that offer the teachers great valuable information for them to start to say, which of my students already know this information? And how can I respond to that? Which of my students know about half of it or none of it, etc. But it's really powerful if there's a content or an objective that all my students already know. I already can start compacting the curriculum already, because why spend an entire day or 2 teaching something that all my students have already shown mastery at at the beginning of the assessment or the beginning of the unit. So looking at it from a universal perspective, but also which of my students did really well individually on that pre-assessment. And then of course, our formative assessments, our little quick checks, our check-ins, our exit tickets. What are they actually telling us? Do we have students that need additional support? And do we have students that need additional challenge based on what we're teaching here? Especially for our gifted students, I love to look at our projects and our performance-based assessments rather than just multiple choice or true and false and those paper pencil type of tests. That if we offer our students different ways to demonstrate their knowledge, that might be more verbal or project-based, we can be really tapping into their knowledge that isn't, let's say, hindered by their writing ability or just multiple choice and deductive skills. So many of our underrepresented populations can really start to flourish when we offer them ways to demonstrate their knowledge in different ways than paper pencil that's heavily required on reading and writing. Most of our schools have some type of universal screeners as well. Perfect place for us to grab data that every child had access to, and we have data points for them. So those universal screeners are very important, whether it's DIBELS or whether it's FastBridge, Scantron, NWEA, all of those type of screeners in the different content areas will provide valuable information at a global scale. So the whole school can be looking at them, but you can break it down to the grade level, the classroom, and then within the classroom itself, thinking, okay, what do I already know about my students who are meeting proficiency, above proficiency, not meeting proficiency, etc. So those are assessments that we already have that teachers do not have to give in addition to what they're already doing in the school. Qualitative sources, I quite often think about what are the things I give my students already. You know, I ask them, what are you interested in learning about? What do you like reading about? Those interest surveys are great places to really start tapping into students' interests, but also their passions, because we can give them so many opportunities to really show their knowledge base in very domain-specific areas by finding out what they're interested in. And then interviewing or conferring with students, that can and may be happening on a frequent basis in some classrooms. It might not be happening in other classrooms, but having those one-on-one conversations can give you just a little bit more insight to what the student already knows and what they're passionate about, and just your observations. Now, of course, qualitative sources are going to be a little bit more subjective because it's going through the teacher's lens. Whereas your quantitative data is going to be a little bit more on the objective side. But every school kind of weighs the different types of data points in different ways. Because those teacher nominations and surveys definitely give really good data to see what the teacher's thinking when they start working with students. Looking at some of the different types of interventions classroom teachers can use in their classroom. I went back and dug out some old data, but it's still relevant today. These options on the left side are just different ways that we use kind of in a way the same structures, whether it's cluster grouping, flexible grouping within class, regrouping across grades, or pushing. Some of these are different structures that are just semantics. But you can see here that we have great effect size based on these structures. And I'll talk a little bit more about flexible grouping in just a moment. But looking at the effect size, by just grouping our students within our classroom, that classroom teacher is giving gains to their students by differentiating for the groups themselves. So the effect size are on the right side, and effect size is the amount of learning gained over a school year in addition to the year's worth of gains. So using that second line, flexible or within class grouping, by just using that fluid groups with math, reading, etc., students have the opportunity to gain a third of a year's worth of learning in addition to what you're already providing with your Gen Ed or Tier 1 instruction. That's pretty powerful, that that students can have significant learning in addition to your Tier 1 instruction when you do these Tier 2 structures in your classroom and give them the interventions that they're showing that they need. One of the best things that classroom teachers can do is providing the flexible grouping. This can come as cluster grouping, or we might hear it as ability grouping. And again, it's all on semantics, and people have feelings when they hear some of these terms, homogeneous groupings versus heterogeneous groupings, ability grouping, etc. But when it comes down to it, there is a lot of advantages for all students when we ability group, because as a classroom teacher, I can adjust the pace, instruction, and even the curriculum with those ability groups. But the most important part of this, when we think about structures and how we use our time, when we choose to use some of our scheduled time for flexible groups, we're making sure that these interventions are effective, efficient, and most importantly, likely. If we only teach the whole group, these students are not typically going to have their needs met, and those interventions aren't going to happen unless the gifted teacher comes in the frequency that is allowed in their job to come and meet with them. And so when you have those flexible groupings, those classroom teachers are going to make sure that those students are having their needs met on a daily basis, if not multiple times during the week, if not daily. And this impacts all learners, regardless of where they are on the diamond, RTI diamond. Every student benefits from ability grouping, from your lowest students to your highest students. And the part that I try to remind my classroom teachers is that this is flexible. If we use a data point in September and we're still using that same data point to justify groups in December, that's inaccurate. And that's where a lot of the bad rap of ability grouping comes in at, is that we're part of one group and they're always in that group. But if we use our data and flexibly create our groups and periodically change the membership of the groups based on the data that the students are showing us, then students are able to say, yeah, I didn't really know it at the beginning of the unit, but in the middle, I understand it now. And I can use the teacher can use the data to move me into a different group. Or if I'm looking at more universal screeners, maybe they're students that middle of the year, they finally caught on and they can move groups up or down. If you're using more pre-assessment data, doing a new membership of all your groups based on your pre-assessments at the beginning of every unit, because some students are going to be great at computation, but really struggle with geometry, because geometry is very vocabulary based and very heavy on those areas. I typically see a lot of, when I was working in intervention, a lot more students would be in my computation group based at the beginning of the year, because usually unit 1 and 2 are addition, subtraction. So I usually had larger groups, but then when we started getting into some harder skills in the subsequent units, my membership would change because we really started to see the application and the complexity of the new skills at the grade level start to come into play. Then we could keep the membership flexible, making sure that we were meeting students at where they were at. When I think about what classroom teachers can do, I think of Marcia Gentry's 2 P's, 2 C's, and 2 F's when we come to differentiation. And I think this is a great way if teachers are saying, I don't have time, I don't know what to do, where do I even start? These 6 topics can really give some great information and insight in how to even start differentiation. Your 2 P's, pre-assess, and perky pace. We already kind of talked about pre-assessment and the importance of that. And then the perky pace is making sure that we're responding to the students, understanding if we need to speed up or if we need to slow down based on how they're responding, giving us that good feedback, using our formative assessments as good feedback, looking at the nonverbal skills, etc. Choice, looking at the 2 C's. Choice, choice, choice. I can't emphasize that enough. Is giving students options and choice, even if it's predetermined choices and you're saying you either choose A or B, but that's still a choice, and students buy in and engage more when they have some choice rather than this is the only way you can demonstrate your knowledge. Having two different ways is or more, or being creative is a great way to get those students to engage in options. There's a lot of different ways to come at with choice. And we could talk about that in a little bit if you'd like to, but there's power in that choice. Challenge, I think that's kind of what we're already here for, but looking at our curriculum, looking at, especially when we start to form those flexible groups, is what is the most appropriate challenge? Is it to go keep the pace on grade level and to go faster and compact curriculum? Or is it more beneficial to go in depth and look at more application, look at the history of the mathematicians or the scientists that are relevant in that unit, let's say. So there's more of that depth and complexity that really come into play with challenge. And then there are two F's, feedback and flexibility. Feedback is that timely feedback that gifted students really need. They need to know if they're on track, if they're off track, if there's misconceptions, if they're meeting your expectations or not. And I think all of us really strive to give timely feedback, but it's a struggle. And I understand that. I have, some sections, I have 50-some students. It's hard to give timely feedback to make sure that they can respond before the next assignment. But our students deserve that. Especially if there's misconceptions and confusions, that we need to intervene and make some corrections if need be. And then flexibility is our flexibility is making sure that we are not stuck to saying this is the only way to teach this. This is the only resources used here. We have to be flexible just as we ask our students to be flexible, and look at the variety of different ways to approach instruction, even if it's different than what we're comfortable with. And a perfect example is direct instruction versus more inquiry. Rather than coming at every day with a PowerPoint and saying, here's the knowledge I'm imparting to you, you can flip it on its end and say, okay, many students enjoy the challenge and those compelling questions, and to come at learning from a more of an implicit way and showing that inquiry structure, and then backing up with a little bit more of the direct instruction to make sure that the core concepts are being covered. That's just different ways, and for a lot of teachers, that's really challenging. But we ask that of our students to be flexible. We should be asking ourselves to be flexible and responsive to our students too. These are some various ideas that I was just kind of generating, things that I could think of that I could share and then pass with you. Is a lot of classroom teachers are going to say, so what am I supposed to do? Even if I use the data, what am I supposed to even do with the students then? So here's a couple ideas. So the first set of bullets here are actually curriculum, and curriculum that I found to be useful, and at least as a launching point. PETS is probably one of my absolute favorite curriculum. It's all about thinking skills. It has little to do with literacy or mathematics. It has everything to do with creative, innovative, and critical thinking like detectives and thinking like scientists. So many different ways of approaching our content in different ways. I'm a big fan of PETS, especially with our underrepresented populations. PETS is a great way to support the additional challenge that's focusing on their thinking and not focusing on the math and reading that their assessments are always focusing on. Jacob's Ladder is a really easy intervention to use in small groups because it's typically a short passage and 3 questions. And the ladder is set up for, I wouldn't say low-level thinking is the start, because even their first question is pretty high-level thinking, but it increases in cognitive demand as you go up the ladder. So there's harder questions, but it's usually focused in the same cognitive thought process. Hands-on equations is one of my favorite ways to teach linear algebra to very young students. I typically teach this hands-on equations as young as 2nd grade, and they don't realize they're working in algebra when they're using hands-on equations. It's a great way to introduce it, but if you know you're working with older students, this is a great way to make sure you have a firm foundation of algebraic thinking before they start going into those more complex and abstract equations. Engineering elementary, it's a fun, very interactive, very integrated curriculum, a little on the expensive side, especially to get all the materials, but it's another great way to integrate a lot of different math and reading, science in one area for an intervention time. M cubed, it's more set up as units, a lot of critical thinking involved in the M cubed, but found a lot of great success when working with our students with many of those units to really think more in the depth and the complexity pieces rather than just going through and compacting the curriculum. The 3 links after that are some of my favorite curriculum companies, and I thought I'd just put the links on there so you can look at the curriculum companies and see what all they have. If teachers are familiar with literature circles or book clubs, one of the best ways to get, let's just say, critical and creative thinking involved in the literature group and go beyond just summary and retelling of events is to use the University of Connecticut, their CMAR resources. These are a set of bookmarks that are all arranged by topic in the sense of nonfiction, fiction, poetry, and then they can go into some other subgroups. But they usually have about 4+ questions that are much more of the author and me or beyond the book itself thinking questions. So you go beyond just retell all of the time, which is typically a kind of a default mode that we go into when we're doing literature circles. I've made those bookmarks, laminated them, put them on a ring, and use them all the time when I'm working with students with picture books all the way through novels. I see that you talked about a little bit one of these strategies with Carrie's slide there right when I came in. If you're looking at homework, not sure how to differentiate that homework piece, one of the great strategies is just determining, rather than kill and drill 30 math questions, which are the 8 most essential ones that I can use to determine whether a student has mastered it or not. Because if they can master it in 4 or 5 questions, why should they continue to practice when they've already shown mastery? And on the other end, for your struggling students, 30 questions is daunting. So if they can practice 4 or 5 times, and you have the opportunity to really see their thinking with those 5 or 6 questions, you're going to get better results than assigning 30 questions. On the other end, I can't remember how it was worded on Carrie's slide, but go in reverse. Quite often, a lot of worksheets are written from most low-level questions to the high-level questions. So if you have students start at the bottom and work their way up, like in math, you start with the word problems, and you can work all the way up to more of the skill practice and just go in reverse. That way you can get the students to be thinking at the high-level questions right away, and then they can go really fast to the kill and drill type of sections. There's a lot of different competitions out there that classroom teachers can use for that tier 2 intervention as well. I thought Davidson has a great resource of a lot of different competitions, so I just put their link in there. 2 competitions that one of my teachers uses every year is Battle of the Books, which is a fun way of looking and reading a lot of different books. And basically it's about quantity of reading, but it's an interesting way to approach it. The stock market game, I can't teach the stock market game because I don't understand the stock market myself, but that's one that Mrs. Carroll uses every year. Once they teach how to do it, the students really engage a lot with the game. Independent study, I think you were talking about it in Carrie's slide as well, is offering that independent study of some sort. A lot of schools use Genius Hours, and that's where you can really start to look at what students are passionate about, and that domain-specific knowledge that they have in that one area can really explode and multiply and branch out in many other areas if we tap into that. And then don't forget to encourage your classroom teachers to look out in their community. There's a lot of church-based or community-based resources that are out there. If you can be sharing with your class about different opportunities. And I get that out of school enrichments depend on parents' availability and funds and things like that, but it's another option. But it doesn't replace what we do in the classroom. It just is, it's an addition to. So that's the last of what I was going to share here. One thing when I was looking at, there we go. One thing I was looking at with the tiered assignments that Carrie had, here is how I've taught my students to approach tiered assignments. There we go. So I kind of modified this template, I can say, from Diane Heacock's book, Differentiation book, where we start by looking at what is the standard that all students need to be working at. And then first start with tier 1 and say, okay, what do all students need to be able to do? And then from there start saying, okay, what do I need to do in my tier 2 and 3 and challenge, where I can possibly give less scaffolding, make it a little bit more abstract, possibly make it more inquiry. And what do I need to do on my tier 2, tier 3 side for more support, offer more scaffolding? It's much more concrete, because as classroom teachers, they're responsible for doing both. And I kind of just use this as a worksheet to help my classroom or my pre-service teachers really start to think through, how do we start to differentiate? And so I thought I'd just share that really quick with all of you. If that's of any resource to you to share with a classroom teacher, I'm happy to share that as well. So any questions? I know I just quickly talked because I know time is of the essence for all of you. But what questions do you have that I can maybe answer? Carrie or Jessica might be able to answer as well.
I would appreciate that resource, because I've been asked to meet with K1 and then 2-3 and talk to them about ways that they can extend and enrich in their classrooms. And I have that coming up at the end of September and beginning of October. So that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. I'll throw that into your Padlet as well. One thing I always told my pre-service teachers and my classroom teachers, is that when we tier the assignments, we want to be mindful to be thinking about how to make it more abstract or less scaffolding, etc. But we don't want to make it different experiences. So if we're learning about life cycles, our gifted students shouldn't be out there, digging and looking for caterpillar cocoons and frogs going through the metamorphosis, and our lowest students have to read a leveled reader about it. We want it, everyone should be out there looking at the tadpoles, but what do we do with it? We want to challenge our gifted students to be thinking about it all, but our struggling students should be out there too. So that's something I always remind them of, is thinking about that way. Chris asked about William and Mary. I've used William and Mary. What I struggled with the most is at tier 2, it was just too much to get done in like a 20-minute segment 3 or 4 times a week. I found more success using William and Mary if it was like a tier 3, but was happening daily. So in my district, we had like my 5th and 6th grade teachers taught core, and we clustered the students, the gifted students, in one cluster, and they rather than fairy dusting them out to everyone, they were at a big center as well. So all 5th grade, all 6th grade were all in one big building. So we put all the highest 30 in one classroom. They taught William and Mary because they had ELA 90 minutes a day, every day. That's where we found William and Mary most successful. Michael Clay Thompson is another curriculum that we found really successful at that every day for 60 to 90 minutes, or even 30 to 60, 90 minute chunks. At tier 2, like I said, small chunks of time periodically, I just didn't find it as successful because there's just a lot of thinking involved, and it's hard to make that continuity continue when there's so many disruptions between meetings. But otherwise, amazing curriculum to use. Absolutely.
Very good. If you think of other questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. And we're going to move to our last section. We are in the home stretch now, folks. And for this, I would like to draw your attention back to the Padlet. And the first resource I have posted in the Padlet is the curriculum resources document. Let me go ahead and share that. There it is. Again, this is a curated list of resources that I've used, and I've started with just something kind of fun. I did daily warm-ups with my kids, and they each had a theme. So we did Math Mindbender Mondays, and I always put some kind of, as soon as they walked in, there was some kind of math challenge on the board. And so in here are 2 different slide decks I used in 2 consecutive years with my middle schoolers. So these first 2 links under Math Mindbender Monday. So you are welcome to use them. Unfortunately, I no longer have access to the resources that have the answers, but I put like the names of some of them in there. So you could probably find, they were ancient. Honestly, they're absolutely ancient books, but you could probably find them on some cheap book website. And I put a couple of the names with links where I found them, like the Math Teasers book was one of them, but you can use whatever you want to. I love openmiddle.com. I shared that a lot with my, I did some co-teaching in an Algebra 1 class and used a lot of the Open Middle activities with them. So I encourage you really to check those out. All grades from kindergarten through senior year of high school. We did a lot of games from crazydad.com, logic puzzles, math puzzles, just some really great stuff in there that they really enjoyed. And this was just maybe the first 10 minutes of class. Ed Zaccaro has some amazing math challenge activities. I love it. If you ever get to go to a training with him, go. He is super fun. Let's see. So those are Mondays. I did a math challenge on Mondays. And what was fun about it, it was accessible kind of to everybody. You didn't have to have a high level of math knowledge. You could use this with maybe some upper elementary kids. There's definitely ones you can find for younger elementary. Use them with your high school kids, all kids, right? So Tuesdays, we did Truism Tuesdays. And truisms are similar to like a universal truth, something that most people accept to be true. So I will show you some slides. I got this from Gretchen Burnaby is the one who introduced me to her. She does a lot of writing curriculum and training in Texas and throughout. And her friend, oh, I'm going blank on his name now. He had a book, and I guess it was a CD series called Lightning in a Bottle, which was basically picture prompts where you would create truisms. So for example, you can see this is the first picture I always start with. And then I ask students to make a universal truth based on this picture. So for this one, for example, some examples, I said the right path to take is always clearer after you've driven it. Or if you spend too long looking back, you won't see what's ahead of you. Right, so I leave it up to the kids to create some, and they usually take a little bit of prompting at first to think deeper. And some days it was very superficial, and some of them they were just so profound. It was amazing. So this one, some examples were, Some stepping stones look different from others, or a helping hand takes many forms. Okay. So the more we do it, the better job, but they're just always interesting pictures. Let me see if I can find the one that always gets me. Oh, this one. Sometimes the people who are absent make the biggest difference in our lives. So very interesting. So the last slide of this document has resources that were shared, free resources that were shared that have a bunch more pictures and examples so you can make a bazillion of your own. Okay. So those are the truisms. There's this site here, you have to scroll down to the bottom. Basically, it's a video how they use truisms, and they often use these as kind of a parting thought on a writing assignment, like a personal narrative or something like that. So lots of resources there. Okay, let's move to Wednesday. 6-word Wednesday. I've also done Big Word Wednesday where we do vocabulary development, but I like the 6-word Wednesday, which is based on the 6-word memoir, which was super popular, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, maybe. But there's a lot of examples in here. There's a slide deck to introduce it to you. So you can show your students some examples, right? And I got this straight from like their free website. So this is what prompted the original 6-word memoir written by Ernest Hemingway. Give you a minute to read it. For sale, baby shoes never worn. Right? Tells a story, right? So tell a story in 6 words or less. And sometimes I would give them a prompt like having to do with summer or the weekend or how your weekend went or what you want to be when you grow up or something like that. And it's fun to see what they come up with there. All right, that's 6-word Wednesday. Critical Thinking Thursday. I absolutely love Think Law. If you haven't checked it out, there are some free lessons on Teachers Pay Teachers that you can download. And I would usually make these last at least 3 weeks, then we'd get started on it. But really great lessons in looking at things from multiple perspectives, empathy, creating an argument based on evidence, which we all need more of these days, right? So that's a resource that I've used for that. You can also purchase them if you've got a budget at your school or in your district. You can buy the whole set of them or several sets of them, but there are free ones. And then you can purchase individual lessons on Teachers Pay Teachers, and they're very inexpensive. And just some really good people behind it with good intentions, and I appreciate that. And then philosophy lessons, you could probably go Google philosophy lessons for kids, but really gets them thinking and talking in ways that they might not otherwise. And then my absolute favorite was Funny Friday. I got my kids up and moving, and these were middle school kids I used with, and it was interesting to see them start coming out of their shells. They're trying to be all cool, and at the beginning of the year, and by the end of the year, they were being silly and playing improv games in class all the time. But I've linked in here all kinds of ideas. You could probably Google this as well and find a bazillion different improv games. And there are lots of resources, YouTube videos that show you how to play the games, but really gets their creative juices flowing, gets them out of their comfort zones. Yeah, and it's good if you decide to do like some of these competitions, like Destination Imagination or Odyssey of the Mind, gets your performers warmed up for those types of things. Okay, second page is lessons and projects ideas. All right. Let me scroll very nicely. There we go. So I know there are more examples and some I still can't think of, but I can add to this and leave it there for you as a resource. But first was, I did a book study with my kids on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. I put a link in there to find the book. My district had purchased quite a few copies of it. I would have one for each kid. And then in there is lesson slides that would show you for each day that I did it with my students, what I had them read, what pages I had them read, and the activity, reflection activity that they would respond to. So everything's there for you, quick and easy, as long as you have the books. More philosophy for kids. There are some books that I've used with kids before that kind of guide and facilitate your lessons on it. But then the free lesson plans, it's the same as the link above. And there's another book for gifted students that I had at my school and was going to do a book study on, and now I can't think of the name of the book. So if anybody knows, it's in this group. I wanted to say Growing Up Gifted, but that's the Barbara Clark book, but it was something to that effect. So if anybody knows, feel free to let me know. And then as far as research, a lot of our kids end up doing some type of independent research project, which I think is awesome. So I've linked in here resources from John Spencer and AJ Giuliani. They have a book called Launch, and they talk about design thinking using the launch cycle. And they're really great videos introducing each step of the launch cycle and what's involved in each of those. I know I'm not with the district anymore, so I don't have all the access I had before, but I used to have a lot of resources. So I'll keep looking for those, and if I find them, I'll link them here. Then the state of Texas requires students who are identified as gifted to do independent research on a topic of interest. So they have created these Texas Performance Standards projects for you. What's nice about them is that they're broken out by grade bands. So you can choose like the 3 to 5 band and use that for any students 3 through 5. And they all have well-organized topics, resources linked in there. Even if you just use it for like topic ideas, I think it's a really good resource. I've linked in here also a research proposal template. So I always made my kids, when they decide on a topic, to really think it through. And then they also use that for their note catcher. We did, I had them do like cite their sources. So they had to include that in their notes page as well. And it was an ongoing document that students would use as they're working on their projects. And it was always a good check-in. I could have them turn them in digitally and see and use that to conference with them about their projects. PBL Works, lots of great resources in there as well. And then I kept looking for a link for this and was not successful, but a fabulous educator by the name of Melanie Bondi created several projects for students. They're really fun and engaging, especially elementary bands are really, really good projects in there. So there's books with resources, and I think there's like digital downloads of resources as well. But Mindvine Press is the publisher for that, so feel free to look that up. Next column is competition. So we've mentioned a few of these already. I did a math counts group, but I know that there's all kinds of other math competitions that you can do with your students. Battle of the Brains, super fun. I think that's kind of in the Kansas City area. I don't know how far it reaches, but super, super fun, engaging, and really interesting what the kids learn and gain from creating their exhibits. Model UN, my middle school kids had an absolute blast with that. The Future Problem Solvers is another option. Destination Imagination or Odyssey of the Mind are very similar creative problem solving competitions. And then Stock Market Game was another one. Like David mentioned, I knew nothing about the stock market. I was way out of my league, but there's good resources for teachers. I watched a lot of videos, and my kids were, at middle school, could figure out a lot by themselves. So I would send them to great resources and share with them, and they kind of struggled through on their own, but I learned a lot. So in the end. And then a few other goodies for you. I love a good raft writing activity. So RAFT stands for Role, Audience, Format, Topic. And I'll just open up one of those since it's fall. And here, students will choose a row. Okay. And in that row, they'll find the role, audience, format, and topic. So for an example, I'm going to pretend that I'm an immature green leaf, and I'm writing a text thread between myself, the green leaf, and the fallen leaves, asking about their new life on the ground in the beautiful colors. Or I'm a lawyer writing to pumpkins, offering legal services, a commercial for legal services about being unfairly targeted during the holidays or during the fall. Okay. So just kind of a fun activity. Feel free to make a copy of this, change it however you want. I've got a summer one linked in here for you as well. But these are also great resources to share with your core content teachers, because think about how, and I actually have a source with a ton of examples. Is that in the playlist? It may be in the playlist. If not, I'll make sure you have it in here. But think about writing as an add-end, or writing from the perspective of an operation symbol, or writing from the point of view of the main character in the book that you're reading, things like that. So use it in your core content as well. And then some other great resources. The Gifted Guide has a ton of stuff. The Gifted Guru is amazing. Lisa Van Gemert does that one. And then the differentiation playlist is the same one I've already put in your Padlet. Questions about any of this? I know I kind of spit out a lot of this, but I really figured this would be a place for you to explore when you have time. And but feel free to ask any questions about what you've just seen in here. About share something different. No questions? Okay. I lost my, oh, there it is. Go back to the chat. Ah, thank you. Oh, I think that's a great idea. Use those with your students. Perfect. Okay. Oh, when gift kids, oh, that is a good one, Jessica. When gifted kids don't have all the answers, I think that is a phenomenal source. Yeah, very good. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up. We've got about 10 minutes left. I've got a couple of last things I'm going to ask of you before we part. And the first is, let's take a moment and digest a little of what you've learned in the last 3 hours. Think about, what are your next steps? What are some things you want to learn more about, or what inspired you? And if you would please type in the chat the answer to one of those. You pick. A few minutes to drop those in the chat. Is anybody still here, or are you typing?
Typing.
We're all typing.
Okay, good, good. Maybe y'all disappeared on me. Awesome. Some great comments here, digging into all the resources, choosing some to share. Tips for IEPs. Yep. I love Jessica's idea, incorporating the truisms into your photography and graphic design unit. That's great. And then turning it back and then take a photo that represents a truism. I'm gonna give that one a heart too. I'm gonna give that. Dig through the resources. That's why I saved it for last, so you guys would stick around. I know IEPs could be a little dry. Not my favorite either. Oh, great, Andrew. Sounds like you're ready to swallow the whale. Good. Very good. Wonderful. Okay. Great. Well, that's helpful. I'm glad that these were good for you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this in the chat as well. If you could use the QR code, or I'll put a link in the chat. Come on. All right, that'll take you straight to the form to complete at the end. Be sure to, excuse me, mark if you want a certificate of attendance. Give me a few days and I will have it out to you as soon as I can. And then we mentioned in the first group, if you guys were interested, we could put together an email list of all the new gifted facilitators so that we can commiserate and support each other and all those kinds of great things. I'll get that sent out probably in the next week. As soon as you complete your survey, you are good to go. Thank you guys so much for investing in yourselves today and our gifted learners out there in Kansas. And we hope to see you at another webinar again soon, if not at convention. You're very welcome. Thank you all for coming. You're welcome. Yes, thank you, Jessica. Thanks for coming and contributing your thoughts. You're welcome. Thanks, Liz.